Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 5, Episode 8. Last call for all unused pitches. There's only 2 more to go. Hey, it is Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland and letting the dust settle just a bit. All the new Trek headlines and the fresh episodes. So, instead of a hot take or a quick take, you get a second opinion from Dr. Trek. Hey, look, I have been authoring, writing, interviewing, editing, collecting, archiving, commentating, witnessing, dot connecting, and yes, fanning Star Trek for, a while now. And I just want to say, Upper Decks. Oh, I predicted it last week. Well, it wasn't so hard, right? Except this is more than just the foursome with Billups on the outside. No. Somebody sat back and said, hey, the entire senior staff deserves a big show. Or at least one scene together. I mean, big enough that we finally just got them all in one shot, right? I love that group shot in the briefing room. It was so cool. I squeed when I saw it. No, really. And then even just seeing them seated around the old briefing room table. That was overdue. I think we had to wait all 5 seasons to finally get that, right? And then Boymes and Mariner, we're sort of the stars around here. The commanders just sort of fade into the background. Well, come on. Is this brilliance, or is it just pedestrian on-the-nose meta-mooting? And I say that because it's not just by inverting it, right? Returning to what makes Prime Star Trek Prime. Because this is the inverted version, right? We're looking at the Lower Deckers. Now to have an episode of Lower Decks where it's all about the Upper Deckers, well, that's one thing. But to then go there by using a split story, a story per character, that is what I love. And it also opens up the floodgates for all the characters and the actors that you're going to need to populate all those stories once you go down that ride, right? And then you need the stories themselves. So hang on that thought as we hand out the kudos this week, starting with our writer, Cullen Crawford, his first time credit. But look, he's won 4 Emmy nominations as part of the writing staff. He has 229 episodes across The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. And most recently, an animated season apiece on Hulu's Mordock and Netflix's Paradise PD. And then our director this week, another familiar name you'll know, Bob Suarez. He's now directed 12 episodes across all of Lower Decks, except for the 3rd season. And then he also directed 10 on Mike McMahon's other series, Solar Opposites. Okay, let's get right to it. Big things, little things. Little thing? The V'ger carving of the pumpkin, right? And then Mariner's Ilea probe impersonation. Did they plan that for the 45th anniversary of Motion Picture this week? Okay, big thing. The Clickets. And just like Freeman, you're seeing the who? The Clickets, who hate being complimented. Now, that was a tiny little story point way back in the episode Veritas, right? The Horn of Candor. It was just one of the stories that came out. Look, I still wish that the Clickets could have been the insectoids that we saw in the animated series in Beyond the Farthest Star, right? With the pod ship, and even sitting on the Elysian Triangle Council. But that's probably a bridge too far. So yeah, we've only seen them that briefly one time. But boy, we get a whole cultural dossier catch-up in this episode. We get ships, we get weapons, we get their transporter, we get their culture, behavior, abilities, including surgical disguises. And of course, we even get graphics. I mean, in Star Trek, you ain't nothing if your culture's not got graphics. In fact, their use here, as a comical threat treated seriously or a serious threat treated comically, it takes me back. It reminds me of the way that the Ferengis were redeemed in midstream TNG, pre-Quark. Little thing, the Bagoons. Well, I mean, they're big, but I mean, it's cool that the fact that they're endangered and that they're extremophiles. Now, that's a real word. It's any species that's evolved to exist in an extremely, extremely extreme environment. whether it's about temperature or acidity or radiation, or in a time of space travel in the space vacuum. I mean, like bagoons floating around out there, but also like I don't know, single cell giant amoebas or crystalline entities or gormaganders. Oh, big thing, because I say it is, even though it probably flew right by you. Remember at the briefing room scene, Billups's report about the corduroy rocks in the ceiling being replaced? Yeah. I mean, Ransom's right. This has become a trope that everybody loves to talk about. I mean, since we've had 30 years of watching TNG and Voyager and DS, everything from the Berman era, right? It was debris, cheap foam on the floor to show that there'd been internal damage. No one back in the day ever noticed that. Yeah, thank you, Binge Era. But no, I love this because it honors my good friend and longtime colleague, Marion Cordry. She has been the archivist in the licensing archives since 2006. Yes, it has now been 18 years. And now she's a director of archiving library. I worked with her since she was the mistress of the slides binders back in my day. 35 millimeter transparency slides before things were digital. And the cherry on top here is not only do we get this cool homage to Marion, but we get an apparently now much needed technobabble explanation for the ceiling rocks. Marion told me that this whole homage thing, which puts her right up there with the Kudograms and Mies panels and Jeffries tubes and all of that, the USS Van Sitters and the USS Eves and Sternbach and Drexler and Mandel and well, she says it was a complete surprise. Oh, those kids. But it could not have come for a more supportive, patient, pleasant, hardworking, and long-working guardian of the canon. This is awesome, Marion. Corduroy rocks. And hey, they're a hell of a lot less deadly than a rattletrap old killer alien shuttle. Oh, little thing. One more about the Bagoon. Did you notice at the end when the last one is set free or pushed off the fantail? It's ear tagged for study and tracking. Some real professor somewhere, or some science officer, is really going to care about this endangered species. Hey, you can call Lower Decks just a cartoon, but it is still Star Trek. I love that detail. But I have a question. This unnamed humanoid alien ensign that Captain Freeman visits for his fertility event, with the gestational jelly and the squid-like birth? Huh? Did we get through all of that? So just so we can not know any more about them? Come on, there's only 2 episodes left. This is a Federation species. I want to know more. Not fair, Mike. By the way, he was voiced by none other than Phil Lamar. Yes, otherwise known in these parts as Admiral Freeman. Oh, favorite lines? We're good to go next time some virus makes everyone sing or whatever. Oh, and that was set to kill, and so am I. Oh, and just a very simple ransom roll. Okay, cast and characters, and that's the bulk of this episode. Look, one thing about this survey of the upper decker leads and using a different story for each, it gives us 5 tableaus, and yes, it multiplies the characters that actually get involved, and so we get a lot of lower deckers besides our leads. And who knows, with 2 more to go, this is probably our last shot at them. And we might as well start with the beta shifters versus the delta shifters. Now look, the beta shift, of course, was what all of our lead lower deckers were a part of, right? And we first met their nemesis, the delta shifters, way back in season 1 on Terminal Provocations. And that's where we first met Ensign Karavitas too. Voiced here for the 4th time by Artemis Pebdani, who recurred also in real life as Artemis on Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And she was Susan Ross on Scandal. And then her fellow delta shifter we see here, Moxie, is voiced once again by Mary Holland because she did that first in Room for Growth a couple of seasons back. We saw her, the redhead species, around the ship a few times, she and some other members. And if you notice, She's not human. She's got the species with the white little spots. That's how you can tell them. Hey, she was also playing Taz, the Edosian civilian captain in that same episode, Room for Growth. And then here on the other side of the shift skirmish line, we've had her in prior stories too, but never in this with a beta identity around her. No, it's Ensign Castro. At least that's what she is now, if Karavitas' sarcastic remark there about ensign friendly is literal, because she was promoted to Lieutenant JG at the end of the second season. So has she been bumped back down here? Is this just talk? I mean, if this hot-headed moment is anything, I can totally see her being in trouble and bumped back down to ensign. By the way, do you know who portrays Castro? None other than our own Gabrielle Ruiz. Yes, it's the role she had before T'Lyn came along. Oh, and by the way, T'Lyn gets the last laugh on Boimler. What's even more surprising here, who's turning up from the beta shift? Hans Fedorov, with more than a towel on, finally. He got a scene and a voice. And though it's not credited, in these credits, or even on Memory Alpha as of this recording, I did a little research on the side, and Mike McMahon tells me that is none other than Jerry O'Connell. Just as it should be. And then somewhat away from the Beta-Delta boundary line, we've got Meredith again, the engineering Aussie who's in a scene with Billups here. She is voiced by Charlotte Nickdow, and we first heard her in Room for Growth and in The Cradle of Vexilon. And then we've also got Barnes here. Boy, we are scooping out the whole crew roster. Barnes has been around since the pilot. Remember the zombie situation? She was racing around with Rutherford trying to go on a date. Yeah. And here she's got the Zerta pathogen. That's new. She's evolving and devolving. So there's Lower Decks' typical meta poke at all the tropes of Star Trek. I mean, it harks back to Riker's Genesis. Remember his Australopithecus? And at the same time, Barclay's nth degree evolution. But I got to tell you, who saw sousaphones as anything more than just silly here? Hey, it's a killer instrument. And oh no, moving further down our popular crew roster, it's none other than one of my favorites, Binger Winston Jr. There is just more about good old Binger Winston Jr. than meets the eye here. That I have bugged people on this show for. There's got to be a story behind that name, because he goes all the way back to the 4th episode. He goes all the way back to Moist Vessel and a crew show, and we were first warned about his performance talent. And here he waxes on in his one-man show, Chapter 6, that he feels stuck out of phase, like Geordi and Ro, wandering. Of course, that's TNG's next phase plot, right? I guess it's infamous now. And then he has the Oberth years, Chapter 7. Oberth being the same class of ship as the Grissom from Star Trek 3, right? That's Eugene Cordero giving us his Binger Winston Jr. once again. There's so little Rutherford here. And then you got good old Steve Stevens. He's a lieutenant commander, but he's acting here for Captain Freeman like he's some kind of executive assistant, or what we used to call in the velour days, a yeoman. Now, he's voiced by Ben Rogers, as always. I mean, he's not only been Steve Stevens across all the episodes of the series when he's appeared and had a voice, but Ben was the writer for 4 different episodes. And he was on staff across the first 4 seasons, rising from story editor to supervising producer. Now, Ben told me this week, after the episode aired, that he only recorded those lines really late in the game, just last August, and he thinks it may have been the last day anybody was recording for the series. And then Kayshawn is here. Of course, he's co-chief of security, and he's voiced by Carl Tart, as always, but made me think, that brief scene, he only had a few lines. Is this going to be our last Temerian allegory? I mean, who else post-TNG is going to give us any more Temerians? And despite my worries last week, oh yes, there is plenty of Billups here. He gets his own storyline. You know, it's a great unappreciated hero act. In fact, I felt like it was in the finest Scotty O'Brien, Geordi tradition. And in his case, with none of the Balana or Trip snark. You know, the engineer is the patient secret saver of the universe. Of course, he did cause the problem. But hey, he's doing his best. Forget stone knives and bearskins. This is duct tape and baling wire in the best old school tradition. And getting a used AI defensive golem gear from the Binars? Who knew? Phillips even has a Spock death moment in a tube. Until Meredith goes and ruins it. But hey, it's nice to know it's the late 24th century, and not only do you have axes on starships, you have deltas on the axes, of course. Look, you don't want no civilian generic axe, do you? And hey, pretty sure this is only the second time we've heard Phillips's full first name. Anderithio? Well, better late than never. Only 2 left. But wait, there's more. I mean, they are really airing out the Cerritos crew roster here. And I love this because, well, Nurse Westlake, I've just something about him. Yeah, it's an name homage to the composer Chris Westlake, but it's a drawn homage to TNG's Nurse Martinez, Michael Braveheart, who was Dr. Crusher's #1 nurse, especially before Ogawa, and then he was still around. No, it makes me wonder if this whole scene with Westlake and Ta'ana is an homage to somebody's daydream of how Martinez and Crusher did, how they got along when the cameras weren't rolling. Look, it's only the second time we've actually heard Westlake, both times voiced by actor James C. But hey, twice is more than we ever heard Martinez. But hey, that's a good kitty. Finally. I just wish we'd seen this Westlake to Anna dynamic play out to this detail way more times over the 5 years. I think it would have been, it's like Westlake is the one person on the Cerritos who can keep Ta'ana in her place when she needs it. Her scratching box? Because if Dr. Ta'ana's pain freak is that bad, woo, it explains much. All those complaints, along with her ho-hum brilliance, I mean, just call her Dr. Hyde and be done with it, you know? Apparently, Captain Freeman is about all that constitutes HR on this ship. But one of the biggest threads, and you saw it coming with the previews, finally, a Shack story. Backstory to the Shack story. Not just this season, but for most of the series. Shax has got to be, of the 8 featured characters, Shax has got to be the one that's the most grossly underdeveloped. And you know, this is a pretty moving PTSD drama turmoil side, though. From the Papa Bear motif and his return from death and slam poetry, I mean, this sequence really just kind of doubles down on what we already knew about him, right? The Cardassian occupation, his freedom fighting career days, he actually knew Kira. I mean, we do get another battle from the occupation here, Tempasa, and his dealing with his therapy does come in handy during the Clickett infiltration. And now Ransom, oh, his arc, yeah, right. In the best sitcom tradition, he makes sure we know that as much as we kid about his apparent narcissism and all the rest, coasting by, no, he really takes care of what he's doing. He takes pride in what he's doing. He has a method to his madness. And you know what? He really played that whole Bob Newhart play dumb and tell a story meme just fine. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go Google Dr. Bob Hartley and thank me later. Solving everything with a story that nobody else really cares that much about. And somehow it still works. Oh, and you know what my favorite moment of this episode might have been? Because I popped up and I was just, oh, because he finally saw it. Yes, the Freemans had a moment. And dang it, there's no star date this episode. You can't plot exactly what day their wedding anniversary falls on. But it was so sweet. After 5 seasons, finally get an answer. Yes, they do still like to couple up. Now, are they in a holodeck of Picard's holo program of the Café des Artistes? You know, the place where he was supposed to meet Janice Mannheim and then reconvened it later? Now, judging by the chairs then, and the chairs in this scenario, I don't think so. But 40 years is a long time. I'm trusting the Lower Decks Easter egg worthy illustrators and artists to have copied them exactly. If not, I don't know. Most of all, I love how she fights intruders. Well, the Clickets anyway. Oh, yeah. She gassed all decks with anti-intruder compliments. Of course, our primary off-ship guest of the week here is the Clicket leader, Zirkle, voiced by Paul F. Tompkins when he's not busy recording lines for Miglamo. But most of the time here, he's not a Clicket. He's in Professor Guise as a Grazerite. Do you remember them? They've only been seen once before. The humanoid species supposedly evolved up from herd animals on their home planet. Only seen once. He was created to be the species of Federation President Jerish Inyo, right? During the DS9 two-parter about the martial law on Earth. But the makeup back then didn't satisfy anybody. We never saw another Grazerite really until now, which makes me wonder, is the choice of a Grazerite meant to be some kind of an obtuse joke on the space cows of this story? Oh, and last but not least, I love that we have our little waifish, freckle-faced cadet back on the ship. He turns up at the end, just like he did in Wejduj, to ask an innocent question of one of his superiors. Just like the little kid who talks to Arthur at the very end of Camelot. Now, that is actor Nolan North. He's also been on Lower Decks. I love his tulips from Tuvix, his Livik, and Chief Lundy. So, did I leave anybody out? Whoa, yeah. The episode is chock full of stories and the people to populate them. I mean, really, look at it. This could very easily have been a whole in-basket full of pitches. Why do I feel like Mariner's Lost in a Painting holodeck adventure was actually put out to be at least one story, a B story, in at least another full episode? Or the Freemans actually being together and celebrating an anniversary? Or questions to things that have never been answered over the full run of the series? Why is Tahana so grouchy and yet so brilliant? Is Ransom really such a putz? Will we ever know anything more about Shax? And yes, will we ever see Towel Guy with clothes on? And yes, while we're at it, how about that list of Cerritos strong crewmen that we've seen once or twice? They're notable for something, and time is running out to revisit them. But the episode title was Upper Decks. You knew what was coming, and it was cool to see all the uppers, the senior staff, in that one shot. But the huddle up chant, really? It was just silly. I mean, even on Lower Decks. And yet, it is Lower Decks. Yeah. Why not cut the senior staff in on the silly? Meanwhile, the Boimler beard arc is moving right along. Did you notice he actually had a join goatee now? But even with that, even with all of these characters, upper and lower decks, all of these story arcs and splints, these would-be pitches, all of this, I didn't see one story path that had anything to do with this season's supposed season-long arc about the dimensional fissure subspace rift thingies. Oh, but hang on. I'm going to guess that we finally get to it next week. Episode 9 is titled Fisher Quest. Boy, what a mischance to go with Fisher cut bait. But then there's just one more to go. Will it be the finale of finales, this episode 10? Well, it is titled The New Next Generation. Is Mike going to pull a Disco or Picard-style finale springboard to new formats? Oh, one more thing. Did you notice at the very end the weird little Disney-esque like moment there? The animal tag ending, the little roly-poly Dumbo like caboose baby trying to catch up with its mama and its siblings, right? I mean, it was whimsy. When do we ever get that on Lower Decks? I mean, have we ever had anywhere anything like that with tribbles or, I don't know, Horta babies or Targs or Celots or Oh, okay. That's as good a place as any for me to sign off on this second opinion. Well, that's what I think. How about you? Here's your chance. Please like and comment below, would you? Yeah, like, subscribe, do all the things, ring the bell. Boost the signal. I'd really appreciate it. Hey, here's your chance to subscribe for some Star Trek sanity. And most of all, if you appreciate the Dr. Trek point of view and our Trekland philosophy, I invite you to go over and check out all of our live events like Portal 47 every month, your backstage pass to more in-depth Trek. Hey, our Trekland Treks location tours around Greater Southern California that is concierge to your plan. Or, all of our podcasts like the Trek Files from Roddenberry or Trekline Tuesdays live every Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Pacific. Or sure, Cadet Alice and Dr. Trek Watch Prodigy. All of it, our specials, it's all there at LarryNemecek.com. Plus our Cameo store for videos, plus our TeePublic shop. There's all kinds of sales right now. And of course, most of all, we'll see you back here next week. Trek well, everybody.